Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. In Luke chapter 10, we see the Lord sending out the 70. And this is the second time that we see the Lord sending out people into a particular region. Previously, we've seen him sending out the 12 in the region of Galilee. And now we see him sending out the 70 in the region of Judea. And a lot of the instructions that he gives is very specific to this group for this particular time, but that doesn't mean there aren't some principles that we can glean from these instructions that Jesus gives to these 70 people who are sent out. And in verse 1, it says, "Now after this, the Lord appointed 70 others and sent them in pairs ahead of him to every city and place where he himself was going to come." The Lord appointed these 70 people, and he sent them out to go ahead of him, which is significant. So if Jesus was going to a particular village or town or city, these 70 would have been already sent ahead of Jesus and would kind of function like John the Baptist is getting the place prepared for the coming of the Lord, and would get the city, the town, the village ready for when Christ would come and do his ministry there. And that's exactly what we do. We prepare the way of the Lord in our day-to-day working with people and sharing the gospel. When the Lord wants to and sees an individual who would be responsive to his message, who would be responsive to him, more times than not, he's going to send somebody else to go out and minister to that person. It could be one of us. It could be anyone. But the Lord will send someone out to that person to share with them the gospel and to get them ready and prepared for the coming of the Lord into their lives. And once that message is given and once that message is received and then Jesus steps into their life, that's when the transformation happens. And so a big part of sharing the gospel with people is really just preparing people for when Christ will come into their lives and therefore transform their lives. And so our mission and our goal is very similar to the 70. We go ahead of the Lord to prepare the hearts for the people for the coming of the Lord when he brings in his transformational power through the message that is shared. But then he says, so he sent them in pairs ahead of him. And this is significant too. He didn't send them out all by themselves, but he sent them in pairs. And that's always helpful to have someone to come alongside of you. We know from the book of Ecclesiastes that two people will fare better. You know, if one falls into the ditch, the other one is there to help him out. If they become cold, they can keep each other warm. Two are better than one. And Jesus is sending out these 70s in groups of pairs so that they can assist one another as they do the work. And that would be a good practical thing for us to do as well. When we go out to share the gospel, to bring other people alongside of us so that we can be strengthened, so that we can be more courageous in going out and sharing the message, but also so that the other person can help. Maybe in answering questions that we don't have the answer for, or just helping us in general. Going out in pairs is a great way to go out and minister to people. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way, but if you got someone to go with you, that's all the better. And then in verse 2 it says, "And he was saying to them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore beseech the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." Here we see the need for prayer. It's not just for us to just wake up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to share the gospel with a bunch of people and then just go out there, haphazardly going out and just sharing the gospel. We also need to do it very prayerfully and to recognize that the work is too big for us to try to just tackle on our own. We need to go to the Lord and ask that the Lord will send other people who will come in and help. And not even in just the world in general, but maybe to the individual that we're ministering to. Maybe we need to pray that the Lord will send laborers into that person's life. Maybe our words may not be enough to convince them to come to the Lord, but if the Lord sends another person, and then maybe another person in their lives who has a big impact or influence in their life, and then another person, it could be altogether, a heart could be won for Christ. And so we should constantly be in prayer. Before we try to just jump out and try to minister to people, do it prayerfully, seeking the Lord's help. Whether it's sending laborers into the field or helping us to have the right words or to strengthen us or to give us the courage and the boldness to proclaim the gospel, whatever it might be, start out with prayer. But don't end with prayer. Now, don't just say a prayer and then sit back and say, well, I'll let God do all of it. In verse 3, the very next word after he talks about praying that the Lord would send laborers into his harvest, he says, go. And so that's the next step. One, we understand the importance of our job. We're going out before the Lord to prepare people for the coming of the Lord. Secondly, we want to do that prayerfully and seek the Lord's help in it. But thirdly, we want to actually go out and do it, do the work, to be intentional, to go out and seek people for the Lord. But all the while recognizing that it's not always going to be easy, because in verse 3, after he says go, he says, behold, I send you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. Very similar to what we talked about yesterday in the devotion with Moses. Moses said, hey, you guys are about to go into this land and you're about to encounter people who are much larger than you and fortified cities that reach to the sky and all these things. Moses was very real about what they were up against, but he reminded them that the Lord was going before them to help them and to allow them to overcome these enemies and these challenges. And the same thing would be true here as well. Jesus is being real. He's not saying go, everything's going to be wonderful, you're never going to have any problems, everyone's going to love you. He says, no, go, behold, I send you out as lambs in the midst of wolves. But we have the confidence that Jesus goes with us. He helps us in these situations. You know, whenever the Lord sent out the 12 on what's called the Great Commission, he said, lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And he's with us as well when we go out and engage with people, begin conversations with people. The Lord is with us. Yes, it might be difficult at times. It might be challenging at times. But we have the Lord there to help us, even when we find ourselves in the midst of wolves. And he's there to strengthen us and help us through those things. So here's some things we can pick out from the early part of Luke chapter 10. There's definitely plenty other things that we could draw from in this particular context. But this is enough for us to get started, to know that we have a very important task to prepare people for the Lord. We need to do it prayerfully, but we also need to go out and do the work intentionally and not shy away from the challenges that might await us, knowing that the Lord is with us all the while. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.